I'm here today with Gareth from Xenon Connect. Gareth is here to show you how you can get accurate trial balance faster with Xenon Connect. Say hello, Gareth.
Hello, Gareth.
And I can't wait to get started.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, everybody. I'll just share my screen to get started. So what I wanted to do today was take you through a few slides, nothing too onerous, just to give you a bit of context about what Xenon Connect does and how it can potentially help you within your practice. Now, I've been an accountant in practice for a few grey hairs short of 20 years. And I've seen my fair share of nominal ledgers. So sifting through those nominal ledgers, those aged debtors reports, aged creditors, looking for issues, essentially. Some maybe, taking a long time to find. It's like finding a needle in a haystack sometimes to find issues and to reconcile things. So I've been working in other firms for about 7 years, and then I started my own firm, my own practice about 12 years ago. I've been running that ever since. And one of my bugbears has been how to really find these errors within the bookkeeping when we get records in from the clients, or when we do the bookkeeping ourselves. Maybe it's a team member that's less experienced, or maybe it's just a system we want to get in place for ourselves to make things easier. So 2 years ago, I decided to start to make Xenon Connect to really address those issues. So what does Xenon Connect do? Well, Xenon Connect is a cloud-based Xero add-on, which saves accountants and bookkeepers time by automatically detecting errors and issues in bookkeeping data and generating a prioritized checklist to address them quickly, systematically, and consistently. Now, it mentions Xero there, and we are looking at adding QuickBooks, and that will be ready within the next month or so. And then we'll be following on with Sage and Free Agent thereafter as well. So I want to do something a little bit different, because obviously I am a member of the TAM group as well on the other side of things from an accountancy firm. I noticed this post that came from a group member about 3 weeks ago, and it was really something that I resonate with, and I'm sure many members do. It's how do we provide constructive feedback to bookkeepers in the team about errors they keep making to stop them happening again? So rather than spending the expected hour on that client and then 4 hours in, my plan for the day is out of the window. That's pretty much a hit and miss approach on how much feedback the bookkeeper then gets on a situation. So it's a problem, isn't it? And it's something that is foreseeable. It's something that we deal with every day. We look at all these issues. We know we've got to sort them, but perhaps we haven't got a system in place to do that, or perhaps the knowledge isn't there. And really, that's what we're looking at. Is when the comments came back in from all the group members, there seemed to be two themes. One was knowledge. Is there a training requirement for this member of staff? Perhaps they've only just started, or perhaps they've only just started on the particular client. And also systems. So some advice came in, maybe draft an email list of how to resolve these issues, so the team members got it on record going forward. Perhaps a Google Sheets list, Excel, or a manual checklist, and then look at how to process those adjustments based on this separate system that you've got somewhere. Obviously, there's no right or wrong in doing this. It's what works for your firm. But what I wanted to do is really show you how you could fit Xenon Connect into that system. But first of all, if we just break down knowledge and systems, on the knowledge side of things, people only know what they know. So they need to understand where to look for the issue, need to understand why the issue occurred, understand why it is an issue, and then obviously understand how to correct the issue. So it's which report do they look at if they're in Xero or a different bookkeeping software. Do they know where to look in the first place? So it's that knowledge really, and that comes obviously mainly with training, for general bookkeeping training, accounts training, but also with training on the software they're using, the core package they're using as well. Now on the system side of things, people only do what they're told, and they only do that sometimes. So most systems mentioned were created manually. They obviously then take a lot of time to develop and keep up to date. So as the needs of the client changes and the complexity of the client changes, then obviously they need to keep updating those systems. It has to be personalized to the nature and complexities of each client. It's not just a one size fits all. You'd have to have a Google Sheet potentially for every single client that you've got. And then obviously they have to be interpreted and turned into actions by whatever team member is looking at it, whether it's you or a different team member or the client themselves, maybe. So it's making sure that it's usable, it's transparent, and people are accountable. So obviously these systems, they rely on humans to review and keep on top of. And as reviewers of the bookkeeping work ourselves, sometimes, and obviously we can make human error as well. But also we need a system that holds whoever is doing that bookkeeping and perhaps reviewing it in the first instance, it holds them accountable for the decisions they make and the errors they do or don't find within that bookkeeping. And it's not a wrist slapping exercise. It's just to improve things going forward for the future, really. But obviously, systems, if not developed properly, can become a tick box exercise for some. I remember when I was first training, you have the accounts disclosures checklist, for example. And sometimes some team members, you sort of glaze over it. It's seen as a necessary evil just to do at the end of a job. Whereas what we want to really see is something that's integrated with doing the bookkeeping itself. And that's hopefully where we can show you that Xenon Connect can come in. Now, on the knowledge side, how Xenon Connect can help, obviously, the main crux of it is that that team member needs more training. And that's something that potentially Xenon Connect can't help with at the core. However, it's got this ancillary effect that it provides a practical training role for the individual team member. It also supplements their theoretical learning. So you'll see when we look at the data check pages shortly, how there's a bit of theory at the top brought in regarding bookkeeping itself. Explains the core challenges in bookkeeping. So these data checks, they're not just created on whim. They are because of the 18 data checks that we deem to be most important, and bookkeepers around the country have deemed to be most important, and accountants as well. So every single data check has got an issue, a so what, and a solution narrative to it, which really explains why we're doing these checks. Why does it matter? So it helps that learning for the individual team members. And obviously it provides context with real life data. It's not just something that's sitting in a cupboard that they pull out at the end of the job. It's integrated with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. It's right in front of them when they're doing that bookkeeping. So just moving on to the systems. Now, obviously, this is something that Xenon Connect can potentially help with a lot more than the knowledge side of things as well. So what Xenon Connect does is it automatically generates that checklist. So there's no long amount of time that you're spending creating all these separate checklists for all your individual clients. I'm not saying you won't have any sub-checklists that you want to create for particular clients. However, generally what happens is when you connect your client to Xenon Connect pulls in all the data automatically, and it looks at every single bookkeeping transaction, and it tailors the bookkeeping checklist, that health check, based on the actual client data. So you're not really looking at this separate checklist on the side and then saying, oh, how does this relate to a particular client? It's one in the same. It's built into this actual system whereby we're looking at all these issues in line with the work that we're doing on that particular day. It can be tweaked for each client. So you'll see there's a settings page whereby you can tweak the sensitivity. For example, on the capital item review, you can set the threshold on an individual client basis or the practice basis, whereby you look at, okay, well, what's gone into this repair is nominal. Is it over £200 or is it £300 for your practice for that particular client? Is it £500? Is it £1,000? You can tweak the sensitivity for what shows up as a bookkeeping issue, depending on the client. So it can be customized. Xenon Connect provides a second set of eyes. So whether it's a second set of eyes for the individual carrying out the bookkeeping or for the reviewers themselves of the bookkeeping. And obviously, if it is a real set of eyes, a human set of eyes, then it's prone to error. We're prone to missing things. Perhaps we're tired. Perhaps we've done a lot of work that week. Perhaps it's getting towards the end of January and we just had enough. So this, obviously, computers don't get tired generally. So it allows you to really automate and look at through a different set of eyes, which don't generally make errors. Xenon Connect has an audit trail of actions built into it. So that accountability where we're looking at, okay, well, why is this bookkeeping not in, the state that we want it to be in? Why haven't you considered these particular data checks? Because if we can see in front of us, everybody can see that this data check hasn't been taken care of, or this particular transaction was dismissed by you on this date. why is that the case? Can you explain why you dismissed it and you didn't actually consider it and didn't actually fix this issue? So again, it's not a wrist slapping thing. It's just making everybody perform at the highest level that they possibly can, really, and hold them accountable for that. And as I've mentioned, Xenon Connect is integrated into the bookkeeping process. We've got deep links into Xero, and we will have into QuickBooks and so on going forward as well, whereby you can click a button in Xenon Connect and it will take you straight to the particular invoice or the bill or the bank transaction, so you can investigate further. And also, you can change things in Xero. You can fix them from within Xenon Connect, so you don't actually have to log into Xero for many things as well. So hopefully you can see that there's a potential for saving you and your team members a lot of time by using Xenon Connect. Now, our main core data checks are broken down into 4 categories. Really, we look at outstanding and old items. So that's your unreconciled bank items that need to be processed or reconciled if they're left as unreconciled. Those old unpaid invoices. So that's instead of really reviewing your aged debtors all the time, your old unpaid bills, again, with the aged creditors. Looking at invoices that haven't been approved yet, and also bills that haven't been approved yet that perhaps just sitting there that need to be approved or perhaps deleted. Duplicate items, we've got the duplicate invoice check, which looks at customer invoices that looks like they've been added twice. Duplicate bills, same for the supplier. The invoice or direct, and we'll go on to look at that. It's quite unique in Xenon Connect, and the same with bill or direct, and that will make more sense as we go through the data checks. And we've got the duplicate contacts, which is looking at tidying up that contact list, really, to make it easier for when you're reconciling items and adding bills and payments to those bills, for example, to the particular contact. And so if you haven't got duplicates there, obviously, you'd be saving time. Incorrectly coded items. So we've got the low cost assets and the capital item review, which are sort of the different sides of the coin. So we're looking at reviewing those asset codes, the fixed asset codes that are in there on Xero, which have got low value items in them, which maybe we want to move to a P&L code. And we'll look at that after. On the flip side, we've got capital item review. So those dumping nominals, perhaps repairs or computer software and things like that, whereby sometimes we might have an iPad thrown in there, or we may have a bit of machinery or something like that in the P&L, whereas it should be moved to a fixed asset code. The multi-account suppliers and multi-tax suppliers looks at how things have been coded in the past for a particular contact within Xero. And if there's something that deviates from that norm, that recent norm, then it flags it up as a potential issue here. We've got the unexpected account and unexpected tax code as well, which is along the same lines as the multi-account suppliers. But the problem with just having multi-account suppliers and multi-tax suppliers is if you've always done the thing wrong, then it's not going to show as an issue because you keep on doing the same wrong thing. Whereas the unexpected account and tax code, what they do is they compare the actual account and tax code of particular transactions against what the default is set up for that particular contact. So as long as the defaults are set up correctly within Xero for each individual contact, so the default account or tax code, then that's going to act as a baseline in which to compare against the ongoing transactions against, and it will flag up an issue if it deviates from that default. Utility checks, contact defaults, and inactive contacts are really ways of tidying up the contact list and making sure that those contact defaults we just mentioned a few seconds ago are actually in place, if that is something you do within your practice. Okay, so it's time to have a little look at the software itself, because really pictures say more than words. So what I'm going to do is just pull up the Xenon Connect software. So what you can see here is the client panorama. This has a number of demo clients, and there's 6 here for this imaginary accountancy practice. We've added 6 clients. They're connected to Xero, each one of them. We've got this health score, and we'll look at the calculation of that briefly shortly. We've got the number of issues, how many issues have been found with that Xero data within Xenon Connect, and the value, the financial value of those issues in total. We've also got the most recent transaction, when was that posted, to give you a bit of an idea on how up-to-date the data is, and also how many unreconciled bank items there are. Now, this gives you a bit of an overview of your whole client base in one place, so what the latest situation is with that, which clients you need to focus on now, which perhaps needs a bit more help than normal. You can select the period, so by default it shows all transactions. However, you can select, for example, since the Xero lock date or the current month or custom date range, for example, just to look at issues. And when you do that, it changes pretty much instantly. You can see there. But we'll go back to all transactions. Now, what you can also do from the portal is, now we've introduced last week, is this activity tab here at the top. And what this does is it looks at the number of transactions that each client has had within a specified date range, and also the turnover of that same date range as well. Again, you can filter that, obviously. Now, if you are using transaction-based billing for your practice, so you're billing clients based on how many transactions you take care of for them within their Xero, then you can change this to posted date here. And what you can do is look at how many transactions you've taken care of within a certain date range. So if it's quarterly or monthly, for example, then you've got the figures there to hand to put into whatever system you want. Now, you can export that as a CSV as well, and it will have your whole client base in that CSV file with all these individual figures there. So it's a great way of looking at perhaps billing reviews as well, even if it's just on an annual basis that you do this. Has the scope of the engagement increased during the year? Do we need to increase that fee? Notifications really pulls up things like if the clients hit a sales target, probably one more for the clients. They should mention that you can actually invite the client to Xenon Connect completely free of charge within it, so they can see the same things that you can see if they want to get heavily involved with this side of things as well. One example would be to monitor their sales target, and we'll look at the sales screen shortly as well. But also we've got VAT registration checks. So we look at, has 90% of the VAT registration threshold been breached? And it will notify you and also the client that that is the case and that something needs to be done to consider VAT registration soon. And also, obviously, when it does breach, if it does breach the threshold, and then this notification gets created then as well. So it's a bird's eye view, really, of your practice and the issues. Also, it has a year-end reminder for the financial year-end for each individual client will pop up here. So you will see all notifications relating to all your clients here. And we don't want to overwhelm people with all the notifications. So we're not creating notifications for the sake of it. With some software, for example, that we use within our own practice for practice management, it takes a lot of work to keep on top of those notifications, and we're aware of that. And it's something that we are very considerate of when we are developing which notifications go into this screen here. You can add team members and you can give them different access rights. So which areas of Xenon Connect they can look at, and also which individual clients they can look at as well. You can specify that. So going back to the panorama, what I'd like to do really is jump into one example client. You can see this Dragon Retail here. If we click on here, it goes straight into it. Now, what we wanted to do is keep this main bookkeeping health check overview, it's called Xenon Connect section, as clear as possible. We wanted to keep it very simple to understand for whoever's looking at it. We want to list, okay, well, what activity are we looking at? Which period are we checking here? Which can be changed on the left-hand side instantly. How many items are we checking? So how many underlying transactions are there in Xero that we're checking? How many number of checks? Now, at the moment, that's 18, but we are increasing these data checks that we're going to look at shortly all the time. How many issues in total have been found? Again, what's the value of those potential issues in aggregate? And also the health indicator, what health score? And you can also see all of this information on the left-hand side here. So when we go through the data check pages, you'll notice this sidebar stays here. So it's a good navigation center really to look at. Now, this health indicator itself, there's no mystique with Xenon Connect on how we calculate this. We don't see a reason to have any sort of mystique in this. What the health indicator score is based on is how old outstanding items are sitting there within Xero are, and potentially how likely they are to be duplicates as well. So, for example, if there's a bank item there that's £1,000 payment and it's 2 years old and it's not been explained or reconciled yet, then this will knock the score down more than a bank receipt that's 1 day old and is £1 in value. So it weights it based on the size of the transaction, but also the age of the outstanding transaction. So how old it is and looking like it, and something needs to be done with it. We do the same for bills and we do the same for invoices based on the value and based on the age. And then that pulls together into this overall health indicator. Now, currently, we don't put a lot of value on any of these other checks, really. It's to do with the unreconciled bank, which looks at how old items are that haven't been explained within Xero in the bank. And also these old unpaid invoices, old unpaid bills, and the duplicate invoices and duplicate bills. Now, we could obviously get very technical and look at the score for incorporating all these different things in, but I like to keep things simple. And if there's no reason to do that, or not a very strong reason, then I'd like to avoid it, to be honest. However, we do always take guidance from our users, and it's something that we do regularly is talk to the users about all these things. But looking down this data check page, you can see here, if I just move my camera, that we've got all these data check pages. We look at how important they are, how important Xenon Connect assesses overall this particular data check to be, how many issues have been found, for example, on your unreconciled bank, what the value of those issues are, and a link here to click through to that first data check page. Now you'll see all these data check pages have got a very, very similar layout. As we mentioned earlier, each one's got an issue, a so what, and a solution. In this example, the following bank accounts of activity which has not yet been explained or reconciled. So what? Well, the bookkeeping is incomplete and does not currently reflect all of the bank transactions going through the business bank accounts. So what's the solution? Well, obviously, in this case, it's review all unexplained and unreconciled bank transactions and process each item as appropriate. Now, you might say, well, I knew that already. But what by incorporating this data check into the whole system, the whole flow, the whole checklist, it makes somebody do something. Because if it's just sitting there in Xero, then obviously it can be left. And you'll notice that with all the data checks, is pushing somebody to do something or pushing them to dismiss it, if that is the case. Now, when you click the process button, it will take you straight through into that particular reconcile screen, that particular bank account within Xero. So it's a quick way really of getting to that. Now, if you don't want it to monitor a particular bank account, perhaps it's a personal account that's been added for some reason to the client, then you can just tick the red box and that will remove it from the whole system to stop it looking at those issues going forward. You'll notice there's a cog button on the top right hand side here of every single data check page, and that will take you through to the settings for that particular data check. So in this example, it's just another way of excluding particular bank accounts from that data check page. So moving on to a few other data checks. I don't want to go through them all because I don't want to overwhelm really, and I realize we haven't got as much time as potentially we could have. Duplicate supplier bills. Now this is quite a busy data check in terms of what we see within Xenon Connect, because you may have different ways of inputting those bills into your Xero system. Maybe it's a separate software solution or an add-on. Maybe it's a team member, maybe it's a client that's adding things manually as well, or perhaps emailing things in. And obviously it's prone to error, it's prone to duplicates coming in, and we need to work out quickly which is duplicated to make sure we don't pay them twice in this instance, make sure we don't pay the supplier twice. So what this data check automatically does, and it retrieves the data every single night or manually if you want to click the icon here. It retrieves it from Xero and it looks, okay, which items look like they might be duplicates. In this case, there's 2 Microsoft bills here with a very similar bill date, different bill references. In this case, they've got the same description, the same value, and neither of them have been paid yet. So what you can do, you can click the view button, that will take you to each individual item, each bill within Xero automatically. If you decide one, you can just see straight off that one of them needs to be voided, it's a duplicate. You can click void here and it will void it within Xero directly without leaving Xenon Connect. If you're happy that it just happens to be the same amount, the same supplier around the same date, you can click dismiss match. And this particular match of bills won't show up again in this data check page. If you make an error when you click dismiss, you can click on the show dismiss matches and it will show any that you've done in the past. And worth noting here is that there's an audit trail. It's part of the audit trail we mentioned earlier on, whereby if something's been dismissed, you'll know who's done it. Obviously, that will be your team member's name there in your case, and the date they did it on. So you know who to ask really about why they've dismissed this, why it's been missed, if that is the case. So I'll move on to old unpaid invoices. So this is really, sorry, go on, Mark.
Sorry, Gareth, just a real quick one. I have seen all of the questions so far, but I want to wait to the end to make sure they get covered.
Right.
David has asked one, would it pick up duplicate if one entry is a bank transaction posted direct to P&L and one being a bill?
Aha, yes. We will look at that shortly here. Invoice or direct or bill or direct.
Perfect. All right, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so moving on to old and unpaid invoices. This really negates the need to look at that aged debtors list as often as perhaps you do currently for each individual client. So it pinpoints those sales invoices that are overdue. They're past a certain amount of days old, which can be changed in settings. In this case, for example, it's 102 days old for this particular invoice. We've got the invoice date to hand there. We've got the invoice reference to hand. We've got details. We've got the total value. We can view it in Xero. We can void it if we know we should have never created it in the first place. We can start to create a credit note in Xero by clicking here. We can dismiss it. Or if we think actually this customer's going to be paying soon, we're pretty sure of it, let's just ignore it for 30 days. So it disappears from the list and only comes back if it still remains unpaid in 30 days. You'll notice that there's various tick boxes here whereby it opens up this bulk process option. So you can bulk void items, you can bulk dismiss them, and you can bulk ignore them for 30 days. So it's a bit of a time saver then. And also you can choose how many results show on each individual page as well. You can filter by contact name here quickly as well. And again, you can show dismissed items. Unapproved invoices. I'll ignore unapproved old and paid bills because it's very similar to the aged debtors, but on the supplier side. Unapproved invoices and unapproved bills. So unapproved bills looks at the supplier side of things. It looks for all those items that are sitting there in Xero, those bills that have been produced and perhaps they've been submitted for approval or they're still in draft format, but haven't been approved yet. And they will show up here. And potentially it's a case of approving it, in which case you can approve it in Xero directly from Xenon Connect here. You can view it in Xero and edit it within Xero, obviously. You can ignore it. You can delete it within Xero. Or you can dismiss it from Xenon Connect here. So it picks out those and it helps you to tidy up those bills, unapproved bills list really, to really make sure you haven't missed anything and make sure it isn't clogging up your system with lots of unapproved bills. Now, moving on to the question, invoice or direct and bill or direct. Now, what I'll do is I'll look at on the supplier side of things, the bill or direct. Now, I believe that we are unique in providing this data check. I don't think that any other software provider does do. What this does is it looks at unpaid bills that are on the system for a particular contact, and it looks at the date of them, it looks at the value of them, and then it looks, well, have we got any payments that have been put direct to a nominal code, an expense code, that probably should have been put against the unpaid invoice, the unpaid bill in this case instead. Now, more likely than not, more times than not, if there is such an amount, the same amount on the very similar date to the unpaid bill for the same contact, and it's been put, the payment, the bank's been reconciled to an actual expense code rather than unpaid bill, then it looks like we need to unallocate it, which we can do by going into Xero, clicking view here for the payment and reallocating it against that bill. Now, it may be sometimes there are some false positives potentially if you do use different methods, perhaps unpaid bill, use the supplier system rather than as well as a direct payment system. However, as I say, more often than not, this is a red flag here, and anything that shows up here generally is an issue. Maybe it's a team member that hasn't got as much knowledge, or the client themselves that think they're helping by really analyzing out and just putting, okay, well, I know what this particular payment is for. It's for repairs. Let's put it straight to repairs, where in reality, it should have been put against the bill. So currently, these two items, obviously, they're double accounting the expense in the accounts, and also there's the potential this supplier here could be paid twice because they've already been paid once by the looks of it. It's showing as unpaid still. Let's make sure that the client doesn't pay them twice. So it's a quick way of looking at all those issues.
Oh, yeah, sorry. There's another one just from Michael, which I think you just covered as he was putting the message in, but I'm not 100% sure. Michael said, if a potential error is dismissed incorrectly, can it be reinstated as a potential error? Is there an audit trail of what potential items have been marked as dismissed?
Yes. So let's have a look here. So if we dismiss one of these items, for example, there's one been dismissed here before. On this particular check, you can see there's no add back to list button. However, so that's coming in. That's literally, I know for a fact that's been processed within our roadmap, and the developers are looking at it at the moment. However, let's find another example whereby we've dismissed an item. Let's have a look. And you can see that, there we go. Normally on all the other data check pages, you'll see you've got this add back to issue list. So if it's been dismissed in error by me there, then, okay, I've made a mistake. Let's add it back to the list. So you'll see that functionality on all the pages within a few days, but generally it's there now within most of the data check pages already. So yes, that's the answer to the question.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've looked at bill or direct, we looked at invoice or direct. Duplicate contacts. Now, I've yet to have a firm of accountants tell me that when they've plugged Xenon Connect into Xero, that it hasn't found a duplicate contact that's sitting there. Now, if you do, then please let me know and we'll put you up on a big leaderboard as being the first to find one. But depending on how you're getting your information into Xero, so obviously nowadays there's lots of different systems that plug into Xero and all the other packages as well. So maybe it's PayPal, maybe it's Stripe, maybe it's you're entering bills through HubDoc or something. And all these different ways of getting information to Xero often produce multiple contacts within Xero because maybe there's a slightly different spelling. Or for example, in this case, we've got Staples here and Staples Limited, which look like it's probably the stationery supplier, and whoever's entered it this time hasn't actually added the word limited. So what the system does is it disregards the word limited or LTD, although obviously it could be the case it's a sole trader or limited company, but more often than not, it will still be a duplicate. So what happens is it disregards that and then it compares the text string that remains, and it looks at the similarity between those two text strings. And if it is very similar or exact, then it will have a 100% similarity here. And that shows that potentially, we want to make sure that we view, merge or archive one of these particular contacts. Perhaps it's merge it into the other one. Or we can dismiss it if it's not a match, if they are two separate contacts. Now you'll see you've got these invoices, bills, person, email, address, and telephone. So what this does is let you gauge from directly within Xenon Connect whether there's been an invoice raised against that particular contact or a bill or a person's details added for the contact, email address or address of telephone and so on. And it lets you see quickly, okay, which of these contacts do we want to keep and which do we want to merge into it? Which one do we want to archive? So it's just a time-saving thing, really. Once you've cleared up the list, obviously, it's going to really improve things and help you to allocate bills, payments to bills and things like that a lot quicker because you've not got 5 or 6 of the same particular contact set up there in Xero. We've got contact defaults, and I'll zip through the rest of these now, whereby we're setting those defaults for tax codes. Sorry, go on, Mark.
Sorry, just a really quick one. Will it remember that for if it's input? So say, for example, it comes in through one of those routes again, will it remember that Staples was Staples Limited, or will it import? Is that down to the import for Xero?
So what will happen is the data will get, the new names will get pushed into Xero as they would normally do. And every time we run a data check, we analyze these things again. Now, if it's been dismissed for these particular contacts with the particular contact ID within Xero, and we dismissed it, it won't look at those items again. However, if another contact comes in, because it gets pushed from a different package into Xero called Staples 1 or even Staples again, with a different contact ID, it would then flag that up as an issue as well, because it would compare it as a new item.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So contact defaults really helps you to quickly set the defaults for particular contacts within Xero. So the sales account, the purchaser's account, sales tax code, purchaser's tax code. And you can do that in bulk as well. And it does that straight away within Xero. And that flows through really for best practice for when you're allocating invoices and bills on a system to what code to use. But also it flows through to what unexpected account and tax code package after as well. The actual page is there. Inactive contacts looks at how old the last transaction is for particular contacts and allows you to archive them quickly in Xero or dismiss them. Now, low-cost assets and capital item review, I think we're unique in providing these as well. It monitors those fixed asset codes, in this case, low-cost assets, and looks for those small items which we want to recode to a P&L code. If we do, we can do that directly here, and it will apply it to Xero, to the item in Xero, when we click Save Changes, or we can again dismiss it or view it. On the flip side, as I mentioned earlier, capital item review looks at those dumping grounds, repairs and maintenance, and you can edit which accounts show up here. We use, I think it's IT and repairs and maintenance as default, but you can add your own codes. And it allows you to capitalize items quickly as well by picking the fixed asset code there. Multi-account suppliers. Again, we mentioned it briefly earlier, but this looks at particular contacts, and it looks at whether we're consistent with the actual account we're using for transactions for that particular contact. And if we're not, it will flag it up here. Now it also looks at 3 months earlier, which can be edited, than the date range that you're checking, because it looks for consistency with prior periods as well. And obviously, if you choose a different period here, it will only look at issues within that date range and 3 months earlier that you selected. You can mark all items as okay for that particular contact, or you can do them individually. And you can bulk mark items as okay here. If you want to get rid of them all, if you're happy with all of them. Now, again, sorry, go on, Mark. Oh, I think you're on mute, sorry.
I am, sorry. There we go. I'm pleased we're getting all these questions. I know I'm sort of taking it off your stride a little bit, but it's really useful to get these questions in. Jeff has asked, on the bill or direct checklist Gareth demonstrated a one-to-one issue, can it detect a situation where payment is posted direct to the P&L that is actually paying multiple invoices? No,
it wouldn't do off the bat, because it will just compare the total value of this direct payment here with the total value of each individual unpaid bill situation. If there's demand for that, then please do get in touch, and we'll talk through the accountants as well, and we'll look at building it in the future.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so multi-tax suppliers looks at the tax code. It's very similar to the multi-account, but it's for the tax code side of things. So when you're doing that VAT return, are we being consistent with what tax code we're using? Now, more often than not, for a particular contact, you'll be using the same tax code every time. Obviously, there will be situations when that isn't the case. So in this example, we can see there's a director here that's been set up. We've got a tax code here, 20% VAT on expenses for a director's loan account. Probably going to be incorrect by the looks of it, in which case we want to go in and view and edit that tax code within Xero. If we're happy with the tax code used, we click mark as OK here. Again, we've got the bulk functionality there as well. And finally, the last two checks here, we've got unexpected account and unexpected tax code. And what these do are fairly similar to the multi-account suppliers and multi-tax suppliers. But as I mentioned earlier, they compare the transaction account code and tax codes against the default that you may or may not have set as within the contact defaults page here or directly within Xero itself. So it looks at, if you set those defaults within your practice for the particular clients, then it compares each transaction's account code or tax code against that default, and it flags it up as if there's a difference, and generally it'll allow you to change it in Xero directly from Xenon Connect if you want to, by clicking Save Changes. If the bill's been paid or the bank item's been reconciled, because it looks at the bank items as well as bills and invoices, then you'll have to go into Xero by clicking the Edit in Xero button there to change it instead. That's just something that the API, the Xero API forces other integrations to do. Again, same with the unexpected tax code. It looks at the tax code used for that particular contact for all the transactions and compares it against the default setup for that contact. It's really a quick way of picking out and saving time reviewing that VAT return, that detailed VAT return report for all these errors that could have been missed, really. It's just a quick way of fixing them. So that's the data check pages. Again, we've got the Xenon Insight, which I'll have to fly through, I think, now, really. Really, most of the things on this page help us with those, well, why didn't you tell me about that conversation we have with clients sometimes? Maybe we don't do the bookkeeping throughout the year, but the clients still expect us to be aware of what's going on in their business. The sales tracker compares actual sales on a monthly basis against a predetermined target, whether it's an automatically calculated target, maybe in this case it's 3-month average plus 3%, or you can pull in the budgets from Xero as well within settings as well. And it'll let them know if they hit that target and give them a bit of a motivational message there. The cash health check looks at the worst case scenario. So if customers stop paying, how much cash have we got now? And what are our liabilities that are upcoming based on that trial balance report? And it gives a score based on how able we are to pay, or the client is able to actually meet those upcoming liabilities. It gives more weight to the short-term liabilities with the health indicator, and it gives less. It gives them, it gives more weight to the less weight to the items that are due sort of 6 months or more as well. Gives more weight to the short term, which is common sense really that it would do that. The bookkeeping health check is a widget which flows through to that main core system that we've just looked at. The profitability is a high level sales versus gross profit versus net profit comparison to look for potential issues, but also just to get a general idea how the client's doing. The corporation tax estimate doesn't just apply a flat rate 19% to the profit showing in Xero. It also gives you the opportunity to incorporate add backs as you would do, for example, in tax calc or whatever software you use at the year end. So maybe it's R&D tax credits you want to put a specialist adjustment in there within settings, you can do so. By default, it will add depreciation expense and entertainment code as add backs. You can add additional items. You can choose what percentage to add back, but by default it's 100. And then it looks at, you can apply what capital allowance treatment you want to each individual fixed asset code. And it will apply those adjustments in real time every time it refreshes the Xero data to give the client and you a better idea of that upcoming corporation tax bill. And it shows 3 years, the current year, previous year, and the previous minus 1 year. Director's loan account. This widget here looks at the state, the health of one or more director's loan accounts that are sitting there in Xero. By default, it picks up the default code, but also you can add in settings other codes which represent director's loan accounts. Now, what you want to see is obviously this green tick, which shows, okay, there's a balance here, it's in credit, we're fine, you know, it's the company that owes the director money. But you'll see a big red item here if it goes the other way, whereby director's loan account's overdrawn, potentially section 455 issues, got the beneficial loan interest, and it'll flag it up there. So as I say, it's those, why didn't you tell me about this conversation? The clients, they expect us to let them know that the director's loan account's overdrawn potentially. So if we've got this sitting there in front of them that they're logging into, then there's no excuse. We are effectively telling them there's an issue, assuming the bookkeeping has been done correctly by the client or team members, obviously. Again, we've got this dividend availability. Now, within my own practice, I get asked numerous times, okay, how much dividend can I take out? I'm sure you all do as well. This is a quick calculation which gives you that information to hand. So assuming the bookkeeping is all correct, it will pull in the profit reserves brought forward. It will reduce it by the loss to date or add the profit to date. It will incorporate an estimate of any corporation tax which you haven't already adjusted for within Xero. Obviously, it will flow through if you have adjusted it already as well, but this provides you the opportunity to add estimates based on this widget here. And also, it will take off any dividends that have already been taken. You can specify which codes represent the dividends codes. And then it will let you know how much profit reserves are remaining in order to take dividends out, a maximum. And obviously, if this is negative or zero, then it will flag it up with a red item here. You can't take any more dividends because you'll have issues with potentially director's loan overdrawn as well, and things like that. It'll be a legal dividend. So it's an early warning system to let them know about that. We've got a business valuation. It's a very high level widget, which can be based on revenue, net profits, and net assets. And it'll allow you to apply multiples to those as well. And it looks at the valuation based on what you or the client put in for the model for the valuation on a monthly basis. And perhaps it opens up those conversations, advisory conversations to look at, okay, what's the exit strategy here? Can we help out with that sort of thing? Working capital cycle looks at how quickly, obviously, cash flows through the business, and it gives you an idea of, well, can we incorporate Go Cardless or something into this particular client or Cresco to really help with the management of the working capital within this particular client. So that's the crux of the system, really. I'm just trying to catch my breath. As I say, there's settings here. You can tweak the system. There's lots of things. I'm not going to go into them, obviously, but please do have a look at that. Now, briefly going back to the slides before we open up to the final questions, if I just pull up the slides again. We've got the pricing here first. We're very transparent, as I say, about pricing. It gets as little as £2 plus VAT per client, depending on how many clients you have. The starter package for accountants is 50 organisations, 10 team members, and you get everything that you've seen. There's no sort of staggered packages whereby you don't get certain features. You get everything that you've seen today. So I'd recommend first starting with that, regardless of the size of your firm, if you want to give it a go, just to see if it works for you. Is maybe pick 5 juicy clients that you want to put through the system to have a look at how it deals with it. Bronze is £35 for 10 Xero organisations. Silver is 25 Xero organisations for £75. Gold is 50 Xero organisations for £125. And then it's £200 for 100 Xero organisations. And we're transparent on how much it costs if you've got more than 100 Xero organisations, which many of our customers do. And it's just an additional £2 plus VAT on top of that for each individual client you want to add. And you can add them in tranches of 10 clients at a time. So very transparent. I wanted to do a bit of an offer for Accountancy Mastermind group members. So we've got a free partner account. So what you could do today is you could set up a free partner account and you can add one Xero organization completely free of charge. It's not a 14 or 30-day trial. It's indefinite. It'll sit there for as long as you want it to for the life of that company, whereby you can look at how Xenon Connect deals with that organization. It's like the Xero model, whereby obviously accountancy practices get one free client for the practice, really, to look at how the system works. So that's the idea of that. But also, I wanted to give anybody that needs a bit of help with this, whether it's just one person or their team, a half-day, one-to-one onboarding session directly with me. Now, if you're fairly nearby within a couple of hours, I'm happy to come down and I'd love to see how you do things within your practice. Otherwise, by default, it will be a Zoom meeting whereby you can invite all your team members once you've got set up with Xenon Connect, and we can go through any questions that you have and see how we can really personalize it to your own practice. So to do that, we've got a link here. I think Mark or Michelle will be popping that in the chat box at some point.
Yeah, that's good.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark. A link to the partner program whereby you can set up. Now use the green button, not the normal free trial, which is for individual business owners. Use the green button for that to actually set up that partner account to make sure you can see all the partner dashboard side of things as well. That's completely free of charge, as I say. And to book in that half-day onboarding session with me, and then there's the Calendly link as well, which I think Mark's putting in the box as well. Okay. And that's it from my point of view.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Gareth. We've got I've got some real light issues today. And I don't know what's going on. It's very bizarre. Sorry. So I'm going to try and work my way through that and see how we get on. So we have got some questions. Obviously, there is a repetitive question from a lot of people, and I'm going to be kind and not to mention any of your competitors' names within the question. So I'm going to reword it slightly. And in fact, David asked a question. So David asked, he said his apologies had to go, but he's going to finish off watching it later on and he absolutely loves it. So that's a great bit of feedback. But he asked what would be the suggestion for moving. So I was going to suggest or ask a slightly different question. And what would be your top, I don't like the phrase USP, but what would be the top thing that Xenon Connect has over some of the others on the market that solves a pain that perhaps theirs doesn't do as well?
Sure. So 2 years ago, I had a look around what's available, and the main reason that I started to create Xenon Connect, my own practice, when it was at the early stages, was because I wanted a system as transparent and clear. So that checklist page that you can see there, that we've shown you, where it shows all the data check pages and the individual issues for every single page, you'll notice there's no routing around for data checks, where to find things. There's no issue with that. There's no sort of cloak and dagger on how things are calculated in terms of health score and things. There's no reason for it to be, we felt. We wanted something that was good for any member of staff or clients with varying degrees of knowledge in accountancy and bookkeeping, really. So our USP really is that we keep things clear, and we will always keep things clear. You'll notice all the data checks, as I mentioned earlier, are very consistent in their approach on how they actually displayed. You've got those issue, so what, and solution at the top of every single one. You know where to look for help. And really, one of our USPs really is the amount of time that I personally and other members of the team talk to accountants and bookkeepers. And it isn't lip service in any way, shape or form. Over the last 18 months, I've spoken to over 160 now, accountants and bookkeepers directly on one-on-ones to really discuss with them, because although this started with my baby, it's been my baby, my idea for my own practice, what I needed, that's not a way to grow software. I want to make sure that this is helping you as an individual practice owner to do what you want to do. And if it doesn't, you let me know and we will incorporate that if there's demand throughout the other client base to do so.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I like that. Sandy has asked, is it available to use in the US?
It is. We've got some US customers, we've got Canadian customers, we've got Australian, New Zealand customers as well. It will work. For example, the tax codes will work and it will adapt because Xero does the heavy lifting in terms of the different tax codes and things like that. Now, things like the terminology won't be adjusted and Americanized as yet, although that's something obviously we will be moving into when we incorporate QuickBooks as well. it will detect where you are based, and it will look at adjusting based on that. But yes, certainly it works out of the box for you.
Excellent, great. Alan's asked, is there anything in the pipeline for Xenon integrating with Go Proposal?
Oh, interesting. I'd have to find a use case for it, really. I suppose it would be in terms of, would it be in terms of collecting payments from your own clients, or would it be for paying bills and things like that on behalf of clients?
Transaction numbers, I think, is there you go. Yeah, so within Go Proposal, to create a proposal based on bookkeeping transaction numbers.
Oh, right, of course, yeah, of course. So it's something I'm very keen to do. At the moment, it's just a CSV export. In order to actually integrate, obviously, we need to discuss with Go Proposal about that. And it's something that I have mentioned briefly with them, but we've not followed it up any further. And you're not the only person to have asked that. It's definitely on our radar, and it is the obvious thing to do because we want it to flow through like a competitor packages does into Go Proposal, definitely.
Yeah, it was certainly something, one of the things for me personally, Alan's just put yes please. It's something that when you were going through that, I know there's a lot of questions in the community, as you probably would have seen, about the transaction-based billing and how to get the transactions and everything else. So I think that's a really useful addition to it.
Yeah, one thing I would say is that I think on that side of things, I did mention it briefly when we looked at the activity pages, that we had a message on the Xenon Connect group on LinkedIn yesterday on the company page saying that we seem to be the only software provider which does provide a breakdown of transactions based on the posted date, not just the transaction date, which is obviously what's required to do that billing system properly.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Caroline asked, is there a VAT check on hand? And that, I think, covers off, I think probably Caroline that's asked the question in the pre-registration questions as well.
Yeah, sure. So we've got the multi-tax code suppliers that we looked at, which checks for those tax codes. We've also got the unexpected tax code check as well. And they will pull most of the issues in, that you will have when you're doing the VAT returns. Now, in development, we've also got effectively a task management system, a micro task management system, although I don't like the name of that because it sounds a bit negative, micro task management. But yes, it's not there yet, as you've probably seen from the software today. However, this is something we're looking at bringing in Q1 to Q2 next year, whereby it will flow through the whole system. It will detect, for example, okay, well, is this tax rate that's actually been put there in Xero the same as what it says? So is it actually 20% numerically compared to the 20% standard rated tax code that's being used, and various other different checks. So, but to answer your question, apologies, no, it's not there yet.
Okay. I'm sorry for my probably inexperience in this certain area, but somebody asked in the Facebook group this morning, completely separate, and I didn't know whether it was related at all, about software to work out the VAT on non-VATable and VATable items on food and drink receipts. Is that something it can go into, or would be able to go into that much depth with it?
I think what we'd be wary of is that we're not niching too soon. We're a fairly early development company, and we're not solving problems which are big problems, but only held by a subset of users, depending on the client. If it's something there's demand for, then obviously it will flow through naturally to us, and obviously I've logged that request there now. Yes. In terms of there is a demand for it, and I'll take a look at the post in the group after and see if it's something that I can look at, something we can incorporate in the future.
Yeah, it was just because she was talking about her software not flagging up errors, and obviously by definition that's kind of what Xenon does.
I mean if it's just a case whereby they're using different tax codes for the same contact, then it will flag it up. If it's something specific to the food industry that you want to look at, then obviously it won't flag it. It won't personalize to that level of degree.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So David put or had asked chargeable to client ideas. Obviously, there's already the transactional based billing that I got from it. Is there any others that you've sort of been able to do within your practice and helped other people with?
Yeah, I mean, the consensus is that if the client themselves do the bookkeeping, then really it's a no-brainer to provide them with the software at a cost, or even free if you wanted to. But there's opportunity there to bill it out to them, because you can say to them, okay, well, if your health score isn't above 90%, 95%, or even 100%. When you give us those records at the end of the year or for the VAT return, then we're not going to start looking at it, because that scope of our engagement is that you're paying us for good quality records. So you can use it on that basis. Obviously, it's got the benefit of providing you and your firm with better quality information. It's less work for you, which perhaps you're not able to bill otherwise, or decide not to bill. But if your firm does the bookkeeping, then really, if you want to bill it out to clients, and the emphasis could be on that Xenon Insights page, which looks at those, why didn't you tell me about this conversation?
Yeah.
So if they're saying, well, I went overdrawn last year and I've got this massive Section 455 tax charge I wasn't expecting, you can say, I've got the right tool. If you don't want to pay for management accounts every quarter or every month, but you want to keep abreast of this, as long as you put the correct information into your bookkeeping system, you can look at this insights and it will flag up and tell you when you've got an overdrawn direct loan account, when you can take dividends out and not take dividends out, so what your corporation tax bill is going to be.
Sorry, so they have access to the Insights page?
Yeah.
Great, okay.
But again, it's only if you decide to grant them access. You don't have to give it clients. They don't even have to know you're using Xenon Connect if you don't want them to.
Brilliant. Okay, so the last question I had was just one that came up while I was listening. Is how easy is it to onboard and get started? So the connection to Xero and all that kind of stuff. What's the?
Yeah, it's very easy. There's a button on the client's page where you tick it, and you'll be aware of from other packages that what happens then. It goes through to an authentication screen with Xero, which is predetermined by them, whereby you select the clients you want to add to it, and then it will start pulling information. Now, for accountants and bookkeepers, it just does it automatically. It pulls everything in. It applies the default settings within Xenon Connect to all that data. So all the data checks have got defaults based on the average use case. Again, obviously you can tweak it. You can tweak it till the cows come home to each client to make sure that it is relevant for that particular client. However, we tend to find that people leave the defaults in there because it doesn't need changing.
Brilliant. Okay, and that's all the questions I have, unless anybody else has any others. It just leaves me to say thank you very much, Gareth, and we'll make sure the recording for those that have not managed to catch up, the recording goes out as soon as it's out of the editing suite, and take all my outtakes out of the initial intro. Yes, just want to say thank you very much, and a virtual round of applause to Gareth, and thank you for joining us this morning, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you very much for having me. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you for watching our webinar with Gareth from Xenon Connect. During this webinar, Gareth talked about how you can get an accurate trial balance faster using Xenon Connect software. He discussed how you can get transactions based. If you run your bookkeeping and you bill by transactions based, you'll be able to get some accurate figures. But ultimately, you'll be able to ensure that your bookkeeping is up to the standard it needs to be. So if you've got any comments or questions, please put them in the comment section below. Please like the video. And if you want to hear more from us and our contacts within the accountants industry, please subscribe to our channel now, clicking on the subscribe button. And you should see somewhere on your screen right now some videos that we suggest you watch next to inspire, challenge, and support you to be the best accountancy practice you can be.